Hi everyone, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Brittany of BrittanyJJones.com. In today's video, I am going to be demonstrating how to cut and mark your fabric. Let's get started. In this demo, I'm using McCall's 7085. This is a full dress pattern. I just cut mine here along the fold line for this demo. Let's go ahead and get started. When cutting fabric, you want to use a sharp pair of dressmaking shears. Here are my favorite dressmaking shears here. The shears with the 7 or 8 inch blades are the most popular ones. You can also use a rotary cutter like I have here to cut out your pattern pieces as well. If you are using a rotary cutter, you do want to make sure that you have a self-healing mat. What you do not want to use is pinking shears to cut out your garment. As you can see, these will not give you a nice, sharp, and straight edge when cutting, and it is necessary to make sure that we have straight, accurate cuts. These pinking shears are better for finishing off your seams, especially if you do not have a serger. I'm going to go ahead and pin this pattern piece down, following along with the cut on fold line. This is my fold here, so I'm going to flip my pattern piece like so that I can cut it out. While cutting, you want to use your free hand to hold down your pattern. You can also use pattern weights. I have some weights here. And I'm going to use my rotary cutter to just go ahead and cut along the pattern. When we get to our notches, these triangles here, these are our notches. They are printed onto the tissue paper as triangles within the seam allowance. So this triangle here, this is all within our seam allowance here. So these here again are our notches. When we get to our notches, there are a couple ways that we can mark them. What you don't want to do is cut all the way into this notch and make a really big cut. If you do that, you're going to weaken your seam allowance. So we do not want to make a really big cut right here along this triangle. As you can see, I'm past my seam allowance. I'm all the way onto my garment now. So you do not want to make a big cut here when marking your notches. What you can do is place a tiny snip here, not going past the notch, to mark your notches. That's one way you can do. Again, I did not cut it. I just placed a tiny snip right here. That's one option. Another option, and I'm just going to continue cutting out the pattern. Once I get to this notch right here, I'm going to pause before I pass it. What you can do is make an outer triangle right where that triangle is to mark it, and then continue cutting. And as you can see, I've made an outer triangle here to indicate this notch on the pattern piece. So you can either do tiny snips, like so, very tiny snips, or you can make an outer triangle. Depending on the type of fabric that you are using, you may need to put a small mark here as opposed to snipping or doing an outer triangle. Maybe you do a contrasting thread to notate where this notch is. And that could look something like this. I'm going to go ahead and continue cutting this out. Taking a marking tool and just marking your notch. Marking your triangle out onto your fabric. Again, that's just another option depending on the type of fabric that you are working with. You can either place tiny snips, you can do an outer triangle, or using a contrasting thread or a marking tool, you can mark on your fabric where your notch is. I know sometimes people worry if they finish off their seams, will they be able to still see their notches? So this is a great option to use a contrasting thread or a marking tool to mark them. Once you have cut out your pattern piece and before you start to move your pattern weights or pins, pins is another option if you do not have pattern weights for pinning down your pattern piece. And that would just look like placing pins like so around your pattern piece. You can choose to use as little or as many pins as you would like, but you do want to make sure you're holding down your pattern piece with something. Again, you can use pattern weights or you can use pins to hold down your pattern while you cut it out and transfer your markings. You may have dots along your pattern pieces like I have here. So this here is the dart point, and you also have circles along the dart lines. You want to make sure that you transfer all of these markings onto your fabric. Your pattern piece may have buttonholes or pocket lines. You need to make sure that you transfer all of the solid lines that you see on your pattern piece. Center front and center back lines also need to be transferred. So if you have a fold line along your pattern, this pattern piece is a bit longer. I just cut mine along the fold line, but if it was the full length pattern, this fold line would need to be transferred. I personally like to place little snips along the center front or center backs. That way, if I am trying to match up a collar and it has notches, I will always know where the center is. So again, I just like to place little snips along the top and the bottom wherever my center front or center back is. That's another way that you can indicate those lines on your pattern. Other lines that you may need to transfer are stitching lines. So if your pattern has pleats on it, you need to transfer those lines. If it has tucks, you need to transfer those lines. If you're working on pants or a jumpsuit that has a fly front zipper opening, you want to make sure that you transfer those lines as well. When marking, there are a couple different options. The idea is to have the marking enough so that you can see, but you don't want it to show on the outside of your garment. The best thing to do is to always test a small swatch of fabric just to make sure that the marking tool that you're going to use will be a great fit. You want to make sure that it's going to disappear. If it's a disappearing ink, you want to make sure that it doesn't reappear back. You just want to make sure that you're using the right tool for the fabric that you are using. One of the most common tools to use is a fabric marking pen. They contain disappearing ink, and so they make it really great to mark either on the right side or the wrong side of your fabric. The main thing is to make sure that you test it again to make sure that it will disappear if you do put your mark on the right side of your fabric. But this is one of the easiest tools. You can find them in an array of different colors. I have these here in a red, a purple, a black, a blue, and again, these also come in different colors. So you may have a different brand or type of fabric marking tool, but again, fabric marking pens are one of the easiest ways to transfer markings. You may also have one of these tools here that has the air and water soluble side as well as the disappearing ink side. This is also another easy tool to use to transfer your markings with. These contain blue ink that disappear as the marks are treated with plain water. The other side here, this is the evaporating or air soluble side. This here contains purple ink and it just evaporates onto the fabric, usually within 48 hours. So if you're going to be working with the purple side and transferring your markings, you want to make sure that you get the garment sewn up quickly rather than later, or your markings will disappear and you'll have to transfer them again. Another one of my favorite tools here is a chalk rolling pen. With this tool here, you can change out the color of chalk and you can just roll this onto the fabric. I really like this pen here. Again, this is chalk, and you may also like chalk pencils to transfer your markings. If you're working on a type of material where markings are just not showing up, you may need to use a contrasting thread and do thread tacks to transfer your markings. Fun tip to know: if you are using this evaporating air marking tool, transferring markings onto your garment, and you're not quite ready to start sewing, you can put all of your project into a large Ziploc bag, squeeze all of the air out and seal it. That will keep the marks onto your fabric until you're ready to start sewing. Let's transfer these markings. To mark through your dots and to get on either side, you want to put a pin. I'm going to put a pin here. I cut out the size 6. So I'm just going to put a pin right through my dot. You want to take your pins through both your tissue paper and your fabric layer, and I'm just going to pin right into my dots like so. When transferring the markings, you want to start along the outside edges and work your way in transferring the markings. I'm going to be using this marking tool here. I like to flip over and do the back side first, and I'm just going to place a little dot there right at my pen to transfer the dot. And now I'm going to carefully pull back the tissue paper, and you may have to rotate your pins around a little bit. That's totally fine. And pull that back and transfer the markings. I have this fabric folded right sides facing, so I am marking on the wrong side. So the right side of the fabric is here on the inside. So I'm marking on the wrong side of my fabric. Once you have transferred those markings, now you can move your pins and we can move up to the next dots. If you have pins that you have put in to hold your pattern piece in place, but it's prohibiting you from marking your dots, you can just move that. Again, make sure that you have other pins in place or pattern weights in place, and then just continue transferring your markings. Now, to transfer my dart legs, after I have transferred my dots, I then like to grab my ruler. I start up here at the dart point dot and I just connect the other dots down the legs. I'm going to use a smaller marking tool for this. You want to do this along the front as well as the other side of your fabric to transfer your dart legs. Now that we have cut out our pattern, and we cut out our pattern piece based off of the size that we have determined that we want to cut out from the finished garment measurements, and I cut right along my cutting line. If you would like to leave maybe like a 1/4 inch of the tissue paper along the edge, you can do that. Just make sure when you're cutting out your fabric, you make sure that you trim off any excess and just trim right along your solid cutting line. Another thing that you can use to transfer your marking would be tracing paper and a tracing wheel. These can save you a lot of time because you can transfer all of your darts, markings, triangles, and solid lines onto your fabric a lot easier with the tracing paper and tracing wheel. There are 3 types of tracing wheels, and I'm going to place them up here on the screen for you. One is a smooth edge, one is blunt edge teeth, and another one is a sharp pinpoint teeth. If you're going to be using the one with the sharp teeth, mark on a protected surface like a cutting board or a self-healing mat, or you can place a piece of cardboard underneath. Now that you know different ways as well as more tools that you can use to transfer your markings, you can go ahead now and cut out your garment, transfer your markings, and start sewing. Well, that is all for the video, and I really do hope that it was helpful. For more how-to videos, you can look down in the description box. There is a link for the full playlist here on YouTube, or you can head on over to simplicity.com. Under the resource tab, you will see sewing tutorials, and you will be able to watch all of the videos there. And you can also download the free PDF handout for all of the tutorials there. Until next time, blessings everyone. Bye.